as I've gotten older, particularly in my parenting role, and trying to understand the dynamics of these relationships that we play. What's traditionally mom's role? What's traditionally dad's role? How does that function in the Black community when we're usually operating with only one person predominantly there? Now, interestingly enough, Isaiah is the only one that had both his parents in the household majority of the time. I did, but it was a very short amount of time. Travis didn't at all. Right?
That's
Oh,
correct.
okay. So what's interesting about these dynamics? So we're talking about energy now. One thing I've learned, and I don't know if you all agree, but I'm just, of course, this is a platform we're going to speak openly. For me, my experience has been that I feel like in most cases, there's things that we know men tend to have a pretty typical disposition towards, and ones that women tend to do. Women tend to be more of the nurturers, more of compassion, more of empathy. That doesn't mean when we're not typecasting and saying every woman's like that. We're not saying they're not able to embrace other attributes. We're saying typically they tend to choose to embrace those type of attributes. It's just part of being a biological woman. And for men, we tend to be more of the providers, the disciplinarians, help provide structure and order, right? That just tends to be what we do. It doesn't mean every single man's like that. Of course, we're allowed to be sensitive and emotional and so on and so forth. But I bring that up because going back to the point about when it's parents in the household. So if I'm missing one of that, what happens? So in let's I'm gonna compare. I'll bring you in Isaiah in a minute. I'm gonna compare me and Travis. And I'm going to say for the most part, again, it was just mainly my dad. So I know my life is being dominated by a man being in the house. Travis, you would say you being dominated by a woman in the house. So what were some of the differences between us so far? You said that your mom was trying to navigate doing both. She's, again, I would believe she's going to tend to lean more towards being emotionally available, vulnerable, compassionate, but she knows that she's going to have to also pick up the slack because bio dad wasn't there in that way to be strict, at times stern, trying to provide that order and discipline that a man would typically do, that the father would typically do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then on my side, I got all of that and none of the compassion and the empathy and the warmth and the vulnerability. So I got an abundance of the stuff that men we do really good, but none of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that the mom usually would give you. Right. So that either way, the point is it's imbalanced.
Yeah.
Why am I even making this point? Because this goes back to Isaiah. Because to me, you have to have both parents in every child's life. Point blank, period. Because I talk about co-parenting a lot. I co-parent. And sometimes I'm working with a client, I'm working with a family, I'm working with a couple, and they're like, oh, I just cannot deal with his father. I cannot talk to his mother. And I'm like, listen, man, you don't get to say that. Because when that child has to grow up, when you don't work with them and you remove that person from their life, you have no idea what hardship you're creating for them. You don't even realize it yet because it's not going to manifest yet. But I'm telling you, based on my lived experience, Travis, even what you just said, Isaiah, even what you just said, and all the clients that I've worked with that I've had to have these conversations with, like, you need to understand we have roles for a reason. There's a reason why it takes both of us to make this person because we have different dispositions that each child is going to need to be balanced. That, to me, in my humble opinion, is really the only main difference between us and, let's say, our white counterparts. Is we're coming up with 50% of the stability in the household and wondering why it's harder for us to compete with them. Because a lot of them come from stable households, traditional households, and we don't.